everyone, a warm welcome to one and all for today's Tech Tuesdays webinar on Informatica Cloud CI/CD using REST API. I'm Brinda, your host for today's session. And today we have with us Prashant Babu, a solutions architect for IICS, who will be presenting for the session. Before we start the session, let's go through some housekeeping tips. The webinar is for 1 hour, that includes a 15 minutes Q&A. You can post your queries in the Q&A box and we'll try and answer them. Dial-in participants are muted for the entire session. The session is being recorded and will be available in the Informatica Support YouTube channel and the Success portal. You'll be able to download the slide deck from the Success portal, Tech Tuesdays page. Please feel free to put in your feedbacks and suggestions for the session in the post-webinar survey. The Tech Tuesdays webinars are hosted within the Success portal, which is a micro-learning platform that offers free and unlimited learning to all registered users. This feature-rich platform was launched to help you learn and use Informatica products better. These important links you can go over later that will help you in your product adoption journey with Informatica. Over to you, Prashant. Thank you.
Thanks, Brinda, for the introduction. Hi, everyone. This is Prashant Babu, and thanks for joining this session. Let's get started with the agenda for today. Introduction to IICS assets. We're going to talk about what are the assets available in IICS, and then we'll get into software development lifecycle. And we'll talk about the version control. What are the products supported in Informatica Cloud? Then we'll talk about continuous integration, continuous deployment with REST API. That's a major topic here, and we'll have a demo on that. Then we'll also touch upon on the REST v2 connector. It just uses for connecting to REST sources and target using the REST v2 connector and REST API, right? And we'll have the demo and Q&A. Well, so what is Informatica Assets? So as you know, there are many microservices available in Informatica Cloud. The major one is the CDI, which is called Cloud Data Integration. And in Cloud Data Integration, we have different assets, or we can call it as object. They are like mappings and mapping tasks, workflows, task flows, and then we have business services, hierarchical parser, etc. Right? And on the CAI, Cloud Application Integration Microservices, we have the Cloud Service App Connector, Service Connector, Processes, Guides, etc. And on the C Cloud B2B and Mass Ingestion, respectively, we have different objects. On the B2B side, we have the customer, supplier, etc. And the Mass Ingestion, we have Mass Ingestion task, streaming ingestion, or database ingestion, or file ingestion task. Let's talk about software development lifecycle in IICS. Typically, the architecture of the development lifecycle in Informatica Cloud looks like this. So we'll have a different org, Informatica Cloud org. We can call org as a repository or sandboxes, and wherein we have a dev. We can actually classify them as a dev, test, or prod. In dev, that's where actually developers or designers develop the assets, and then they actually save those assets in a project folder. They can actually create different project folders and or in a hierarchical directory structure and save all those assets in there. And once they complete the development activities and test complete the unit testing, they can actually deploy. They need to deploy these assets into test environment, or if they don't have tests, they can directly go into the production environment, deploy it in production environment. So in typical world, Informatica has this Git option for version control, wherein they can actually check in and check out from Git, and from Git they can actually pull it. So they can also pull from the higher environment, test or production environment, and pull it from Git. That's the first architecture shows here. Whereas we are going to discuss about the second option, which is pushing the code from dev environment to external repository. So this external repository can be any local file system or S3 or ADLS or Kafka topic or whatever, right? Then from there, we can push this into the higher environment, which is can be test or production. So how we're gonna do this is basically we're gonna use, we can actually use multiple options here. One is that you can actually manually export and then put it into the repo, and from repo again use that import, take it and import into the higher environment. That's completely manual process. But then the second option we have is the asset management CLI. I think you guys are already familiar with that. That is again a command line tool which comes in handy, and you can actually download and use those command line tools. Command line tool to export, import, export, download, extract, package it back, then import. All those things you can do with that commands. And even that command can be plugged in with the Jenkins for building a pipeline for continuous deployment, right? And the third option is using the REST API. So that's what we're going to discuss here. Informatica Cloud provide different REST API resources for different purposes. So we're going to utilize the deployment API resources for deploying the code from lower environment to the higher environment. So we will build the application integration process, which will use this API resources, which can be then export, download, and then import and push it into the higher environment. And we can also store that in the external repo while pushing from the dev, right? It can be any file system. Let's talk about the version control. I'm not going to explain much on the version control because it's a different topic and we are not going to cover much on this. But just to explain what are the repositories supported on the version control we support on-prem and cloud. On the cloud side, we support GitHub and Azure DevOps. On the on-prem, we support GitHub Enterprise, GitLab Self-Managed, and Bitbucket. Okay. So whoever has all the whoever has this Git repos, they can use this. You can utilize this for version control. Right now, cloud integration, cloud deployment. So continuous integration, continuous deployment with REST API. So this is what we're going to focus on the demo. So what we're going to do here is we're going to use Informatica Cloud REST API resources, which are, create tag, find object, export, download, import, upload, and publish. So these resources we can use to automatically deploy the code from, dev to test or test to production or other orgs if they have. So create tag is basically can be used to create tag automatically using REST API, but in this case, we are not going to use that API. We can create tag from UI itself. So why we have to create a tag is just because we can actually tag number of assets into a particular tag name. So that way you can use the tag name to find objects and then use those objects to deploy, right? So we'll discuss that in detail in the demo, but to understand in big picture that create tag is basically to create a tag with the number of assets we want to deploy, and then we use find object using the tag name and get those object IDs and use those object IDs to export and download. Then we use import and upload. Publishes are optional. Some assets need not have to publish, and the publish API is not really public to all the customers. So I'm not going to do that here because it's not really public. It will be coming soon with the proper documentation and all. So then we can actually use that publish option. So now REST v2 connector. We can use this API resources from Informatica Cloud and create Swagger file with those resources. And then once we have the Swagger file, we can actually create REST v2 connection. So once we have the REST v2 connection, we can use that in the mapping to read data or write data into REST sources, right? REST target or sources. So we can also create this automatic deployment process in the application integration microservices, and then use that application integration REST API URL to create Swagger, and then use that as use that Swagger file to create a REST connection, and then we can actually build a business service in CDI and use the business services to use it in the web service call, web service transformation. So the reason I'm talking about this is that suppose you wanted to pass input parameter. You have, let's say you have a number of deployment things you have to do, and you wanted to pass them as a particular source file. Let's say you have a source file which has a number of things you wanted to, a number of tags. Let's say you created multiple development team created different tag, and you wanted to deploy all of them together. You can actually put those tag name and things like that in the source file, and then run it with this web service transformation, which will in turn call this application integration process. I'm not going to give demo on that because that's going to take a lot of time. So I will just focus on the application integration process. So these are the useful document links: REST API, Asset Management CLI, Git version, and Git version on-prem, right? So you can take a look at this documentation for more information. Right? And let's get into the demo. So we log into Informatica Cloud. Then let's go to application integration. Before going there, I'll just open the REST API documentation. And here we can see that these are the different REST API resources in Informatica Cloud. You can actually look at, we have API version 2 and API version 3. In API version 2, we have a certain set of resources. For example, activity log for pulling the log information of the job, right? Like activity monitors to get the status of the job, current running job. Like example, this is login for login to ASCS. So there are so many resources here. You can use it, but we are going to focus on the API version 3, which has these import export and object find asset with object. All these are the things we are going to explore on this demo. So let's get started with the application integration. So in order to start with the application, before we build the process, first thing what we need to do is create a service connector, right? So service connectors are nothing but a kind of a connector where we can actually create different services, or we can call it as actions. So where we can actually bind these API resources and create some input parameters and create output. So many things we can do with that. So what we are going to do here is use these assets, API resources, and use this API URLs, what input parameters we need. Based on all this information, we can actually create them in the service connector. So I have already created one service connector, so I'm not going to redo that. So just I'll just open that service connector for that deployment. So this is the service connector I created. So how do you create this service connector? It's very simple. We just go to new and then click service connector and click create, right? Then you'll get a page like this where you can actually give a name, and then automatically the location will be default, or if you're using your folder, by default comes your folder. And if suppose you wanted to put some connection properties, you can put it here. And then these connection properties, we can actually configure it in the app connector. let's get, so the action, then the next tab is action, and the actions where we create different type of actions. So in this demo, we need to create different actions because we need to first find asset based on the tag name. And then once you get the object IDs, then we need to start export, import. In the export itself, we have to do download, export and download. For import, we have to do upload and import, right? There are two things. And also we have to get this job status, export status, as well as import job status. So all these resources we need to use. So for that, we have created different actions. So you can create action with this plus sign here. So first thing is creating a get objects by tag name. So how do we create a tag here, right? So first we can create a tag. For example, just go to a folder, and let's say I wanted to create a tag. So I'll go to my project folder, and then I'll select few assets I want to deploy. So let's say I want to deploy some mapping, all right? And mappings and some, we'll select different assets. For example, let's say I select the from Snowflake demo, and let's say I select one of the S3 demo, and let's select a different object type. This is mapping. Well, let's select one mapping task, which is S3 demo testing. I'll select this, and then we can also take one maplet or any application integration process. So let's select one application connector itself. Let's say app login IACS, right? So I select one from application integration, and these two are from the CDI, right? Microservices. So once we have this, so it will show here 3 selected, then you can create a tag with that. So the tag name, I'm going to name it as, let's say, deploy project tag 1 or version 1, right? So once you give this name, what happens is with this tag, you can actually query this object, right? So that's the advantage. So you can create a number of tags. You can select another object and create another tag. And when you make some changes, you can create another version of the tag and then use that. So you can do multiple things with that, right? And once you create this tag name, so now we have created this tag as deploy project version 1, right? So we can actually use that here, get object by tag, and in the get object by tag, we can actually look at here what are the things required for finding the asset, right? So in get object by tag, we can actually use this URL, and you need to just use this query. So in this example, they are giving location is equal to this. So instead of location, we are going to use a tag name. So tag is equal to that. That's what you're going to do. So for example, here tag q is equal to tag is equal to that tag name, right? So that's the same thing. We are going to build it here in the binding. So if you see that I put the URL here, and the tag is equal to the tag, and this tag is actually parameterized in the input fields. So it is going to come from the input field. And for calling any of the API, we need to pass session ID, Informatica Cloud login session ID. So that is what the second parameter, right? And in the binding, I need to make sure that I'm passing that info session ID from that session ID from Informatica Cloud. How do we get this session ID? We'll talk about it. I'll create another app connector with a login with the ISCS REST API to get that. And once we have this, then we can put some input to test it. So we can actually test also here in the service connector. That's another advantage of here. So you can actually test it. You can actually test this in Postman, and you can actually put that same configuration here. For now, I'm going to run login and get the session ID to test it here, right? So let me get a session ID from here, put it here, and then I'll put the tag name which you created here, deploy project version 1, right? And then in the binding, it will get passed over here in processionary, and the tag is here. So in the output, I just put one ICS object and ICS object response. This is the complete entire response, but this one I have derived it. I'll show you how what I've done to derive this. So let's test this now, and it says it failed. Actually, it says invalid query parameter. So the deploy project version is specified is not unable to find the tag. So I think I created a wrong. I gave a wrong name. I don't remember what's the name I gave. Let's see what I have given. Deploy project version 1. Deploy project version 1. Okay. So let's give that again. Deploy project version 1. So that's one I gave. Deploy underscore proj underscore version 1, right? So let's test this. Deploy underscore project underscore version 1. See any problem here? Okay, now let's go to test result and test it again one more time. Yeah, so it worked. So I think the J was missing there. So now you see this is, I got two output because I put two output here. So that's why I'm getting two output. One is the complete response. So this is what the complete response I get. And what I need for the next API call is I just need only the IDs, object IDs. So it has all the object IDs. So it has this ID, first ID, which is mapping name. It's a mapping, and then we have the second ID, which is the mapping task, I believe. So this is mapping task, I believe, and this is mapping, and this one is the deploy, and this one is the MTT. This is a mapping task, and this is the connection, application integration connection, and this one is the mapping. Yeah. So I don't need all this information. I just need only the ID. So that's what I'm doing here. So what I'm going to do, what I'm doing is that let's go to the root objects and get all the IDs in a loop, right? Run with a for loop and get all the object IDs. That's what I'm gonna. So I'm just using a simple X query to get that IDs. So it goes through the root and objects and get all the IDs. So that's what I'm getting here. ID1, ID2, and ID3. It will create an array. And once we have this, and then using this ID, we can actually export it. So that's another action, export object. And in the export object, we need to pass that object and name. So if you look at the object export object here, you'll see that use this resource, and we have this. We need to give this JSON object because it's a post. We have to give this as a body. In the body, we have to give a export name and the array of object we need to export. And we can also put include dependencies true, which means it will include all the dependencies. But if you don't specify, by default, it is going to take all the dependencies. So I'm not putting include dependencies. I'm just going to put this array only, the ID 1, 2, 3. So that's what I'm doing here. I just, for testing purpose, I just put it like that. But I'm already getting this object from the previous call, and the name I'm passing as additional thing. And in the binding, I will do a post and then use JSON binding. So when you do JSON binding, it will use what are the parameters. It will create a JSON object, right? And that's about it. And then we can actually test it. And when you test it, we'll see that it's getting, let's say, just test it, for example, 1, 2, 3, 4, and test. And before that, we need to put this session ID and test it. So now you will see that it's actually got 200, which is success. And I got an export ID because in the output, I'm actually getting export ID from the ID text and status and pulling the HTTP status. So that's why you are seeing that two output here, export ID and HTTP status. So now if you look at your export log, you'll see that test 1, 2, 3, 4 we just did. It's actually coming now, right? So let's go here again, and yeah, so it's export is working fine. So similarly, I build for other services. I cannot explain all of them because we have the time limit. So I did the same thing for import object, upload object, and get import status and export status. Only thing is, while importing, what is that download package, you cannot download the file from here. So instead of that, what we do is we use attachment instead of downloading, because we cannot download it here, right? The zip file. So what we do is output we create for that download package API call as a attachment, and we then use that attachment to write it into S3 bucket or a local file system or ADLS or whatever, right? And then use this attachment again to import and upload and import, right? That's what I'm going to do. So in the upload object, you will see that input is a binding attachment package, which is attachment, and you will see the binding. We'll put that package. So that's attachment. We are actually passing. Basically, we are passing that file as an attachment, and once we have upload, we'll get an ID, upload object ID, and use that ID. We can actually import it. That import job will just use that ID to import it. So yeah, so that's all about an import status is to get the import status. Similarly, export status is to get export status, right? So we'll see that export status. Now, once you create service connector, we just need to create an app connector for this. So you just save and publish this, and then you can create an in the app connector for app connector. So how do you create app connector is you need to you just create again new and then plus app connector and create new, right? So then you will get a page like that. You give the name and select your secure agent or cloud. In my case, I'm selecting cloud server to deploy. Publish my app connector, and you select the service connector you build here, and then you publish it. So unless you create an app connector, you cannot use that in the process. So service connector is just medium where you can actually develop your REST APIs, and then once you develop, you need to publish through the app connector, and then you can use this app connection in the process. So once we have this, we just create a new process, right? Click on the processes, and then click on process, create new. So I have again build the process here, proc deploy object. So you'll get a page like this, with the start and end. There we can actually give, we start developing the process. So you see this here, I actually already built here. It's very straightforward. Once you have this service connector built properly and tested well, then it's simply we are using those service connector to put as data flow, right? So first thing what we need to do is log into IACS. So how do we log into IACS? Is we just create a new app connector and then use inbuilt app connection type. So we have different app connection type. So in order to write into Amazon S3, we need to create a connection called Amazon S3. And then once you have Amazon S3 and specify your configuration for Amazon S3 bucket name and access key ID and all, we need to create an event target or event source. Source for reading data from S3, writing is for writing. So in our case, it's a zip file, which is getting downloaded from the Informatica Cloud. So we can use this writer to write it. If it's a delimited file, we can use delimited content writer to write it to S3 bucket. So you can create a writer and then configure your S3 bucket name to write it, right? Similarly, for IACS, to log into IACS, or before going to IACS, you can also create a file connection. File connection is for writing into local file system. You can similarly do the same thing. You can create event source and target, and we can also use Kafka, RabbitMQ, etc. Right? There are so many connections, but we don't have ADLS here. So we cannot create an app connection with the ADLS, but we can create ADLS. We can use the ADLS REST API to build a service connector, and then use that to create app connector to write into ADLS. So that option is there. So for now, we're going to use the Amazon S3 to write into S3 bucket. And in order to log into Informatica Cloud, we use this Informatica Cloud API version 2 type. There we can give the API ISCS login URL. This is a standard URL, and then use your username and password. And once you save this and publish, then you can use this app connection in here. You can actually pull the service here and then use here, and then use that. I created an app connection called app login ISCS. Once you have that connection, you will get a lot of actions, inbuilt actions with that connection. So you'll see that with agent, you can get agent, list agent, or you can, for authentication, we can get login, logout, etc. And there are so many other actions we can do with that connection. So in our case, we just need the login. So we just use that connection and create action as login. And it does not need any input parameter. It is all parameters are already there in the app connection itself. And that is one good thing, because we can also create a service connection with the API login API resources. But in that case, then we need to pass those username password, right? In here. So I don't want to do that. So we can, this is the best option. We get a lot of inbuilt options with that. And then once we have that, we just do the same flow. We do the get object by tag. Then once for get object by tag, we have to pass one of the parameters, the tag name. So whatever the input parameter you need to pass, you need to actually mention over here on the start. So you go to input field and then specify what are the input parameter which this process expect. One is a tag name, another one is export file name, and then there's a conflict. So a tag name is for to search the tag, search the object with a tag name, and export file name is for exporting the file with the name. And I'm going to use the same parameter for importing as well. And while importing, there is also a property we need to pass, which is a conflict resolution, because if the object is already present in the higher environment, there will be a conflict, right? In that case, what do you want to do? You want to do a reuse or overwrite. So that is this parameter. So you can actually pass these three parameters to call this process. So it does the same thing. So you just get object by tag. Once you get the tags, then it goes to check whether any objects are available in the tag. If objects are there, it will go here. Otherwise, it will just end here. If objects are there, then it will start exporting that objects. Then once it's exported, it check the status equals 200. If it's successful, then check the status of the export job. If and then wait for some few seconds. I put it for now, just for 1 second. I put it, and again check the status. Success or it's in progress or something. So if it is success, then it goes here. If it is not, it will again go back here, jump back here, and then again check the status, and again check the status. And if it is success, then it will go here. Then it download the package, then it will write it into S3 bucket. So in order to write into S3 bucket, we need to pass some of the properties of the S3, like file name, content format. In this case, as I said, we are actually using attachment from the service connector. So we use that attachment to write, and we have to specify that content format as attachment. And I think I put okay, this is for file writer. So I don't need this. I'm going to use only S3. So S3 is actually I put two temp variable, one for file writer, which is going to write into the local file. This is for S3 writer. So we are gonna this particular thing is for demos for S3, but I put anyway both of them. So that's why you see here both properties. This is for writing it into temporary to the local file system, and these properties is for S3. So we just need these two mandatory properties. One is the content format, another one is the file name, S3 key, which is a file name. So once we have this, then we can use our app S3 connector to just write it into that. I use that RPS3 zip writer connection, and then in the input field, I need to pass that object, whatever we define here, we just pass that, and attachment we say down, as a field. By default, it will come when you select attachment here. So this will take care of writing into S3 bucket and then log out from here, because we export it from one particular org. Let's say it's a day org, then we need to import into another org, which is a test or production, right? So we log out from here, from Informatica Cloud, then again log into new Informatica Cloud org, and then upload and import object, right? And then check the import status. If it is success, it's done. If it is not, it will wait, and then again check the status, and it is, once it is done, it is goes here and finish. So that's about this data flow. I know I'm going a little faster, and I'm not explaining everything because we have very limited time. So we can actually, I can share this in our Informatica knowledge channel. So we can actually, you can take it. I can put this as an article, and you can download this process from there. Let's run this process and see how it works, right? Let's run using this. So you can run it from here, or you can take the API from properties, take this property and run it from Postman, right? You can do either way. So let's run it with the inbuilt run option from here. So there, as I said, we have 3 inputs, right? We need to pass. One is a tag name. So in our case, the tag name is deploy project version 1, right? And the file name, I'm going to put deploy test project or deploy project. Deploy project version 1. And in config, I'm going to use reuse. Just don't overwrite, just reuse it. So these are the input parameters to expect, and then just save it, and then you can run it, right? Let's run it. So once it is failed here, just checking what is the error message. User does not have record permission. App login ISCS. Oh, I think I gave a wrong app log ISCS here. So let me check. Yeah, so I don't need this service. I'm just gonna use I think I have some. So I'm using app login ISCS, and logout. Oh, logout I put here. So okay. Login is again app login ISCS login. So there are no issues here. And logout. There are no issues here. Okay, so we'll run it one more time and see what is the error. So this is the S3 bucket I'm going to write it into just before that. So this is empty now. So this is my bucket name, and it's empty. It has just a one folder, but I am expecting to write some files here, right? So let's run it one more time and see what is the error coming. Oh, it seems like that the object I created has it's not valid. So what I need to do is, in this case, the one I created the tag name, right? Let me create another tag. because I think that's why we need to select the objects which is tested correctly, which is working correctly. So I think that the objects I selected is not good. So in my case, let's take these three, or let's go here, and I'll select one which are working good, which are validated correctly. So let me take M to Snowflake, and I'll also select M from Snowflake, and I'll take one of the app connector, which is ISCS API, or I'll take this get request, this maplet, for example, right? And then we'll create a tag again one more time. Give a tag name as deploy project version 2. Save it. And let's test with this. I think that's why the error was. So let's test this version 2. Run it, save and test, run it. Okay, now it's not throwing an error. So let's go to the application integration process console and see whether it is running or not. So let's go here and see whether the process is running. You see that it's running now. So it's all good. So it's running, and now we'll see here on the export import log, we'll see whether it is coming or not, right? So on the export, you'll see that the version 1, this is the one we did. See, earlier one, it failed because the user does not have record permission. I think I used someone else property asset, but it was there in my folder, but I think somebody else created it. So that's fine. So this one is the one, it's done now. So export is done. Now it will be, so the import is also done. So now if you look at this, refresh. Okay, it's not done yet. But now if you see this, refresh your S3 bucket, we'll see that it is created here. See, deploy projects version zip. So now it's got export into S3 bucket, and it's still running. We'll see it's completed. So now you see this on the import one. This is the one's completed, and if you look at here, we'll see those three objects, right? From to Snowflake and a maplet. So these three got deployed with the dependencies. So these are the dependencies for these three assets, right? So that's it, guys. So this is how the automation, the continuous deployment happens through the REST API. And with that, we can wind up this session, and let's go to the Q&A. Thank you.
Hello everyone. If you have any queries regarding the session, please post them in the Q&A box. We have Shiv and Prashant from the backend to answer your questions. Over to you, Prashant.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Sundar.
Yeah, Prashant, we have one question
from
Vin. Yeah.
Okay, so you showed the tag. Okay, we'll create the tag. Will the tag stored in GitHub or GitLab? Can you show that ISCS doesn't have its own version control? Also, we want to see tag promotion to higher environment. Okay, so this is not for GitHub or GitLab. This demo is presented for people don't have the GitHub or GitLab. So basically, if they wanted to store these files in an external repository like local file system or S3 or other file system instead of GitHub or GitLab, So if you have GitHub and GitLab, you can actually configure that directly in the Informatica Cloud, and then you can check in and pull from GitLab or GitHub, right, directly. So you don't need to actually build this pipeline. But in some cases, you may have to configure some information. You may have to edit some information before deploying into the higher environment. Then, in that case, probably people build the Jenkins pipeline or some CI/CD pipeline to edit that metadata information and then promote it to another org. But yeah, this particular demo is this presentation is for people who don't have this GitHub or GitLab. Yeah, so but we can still use GitHub and GitLab here. But I'm just saying the idea here is for the external repository rather GitHub and GitLab. And coming to the next question, can we update manipulate assets after download step? So that's one of the disadvantages of using REST API. We don't have that extract IACS command, REST API resources to extract and do some update, because that's not available right now. But so the only option for that kind of thing is using the asset management CLI, and in asset management command line property we have the extract and package option to do that. So so you should go for that. But this is the simple, straightforward, promotion from lower node to higher node. But then you have to edit few of the stuff after promoting. Yeah. I just okay. Can IACS use GitHub Action for CI/CD instead of using Jenkins? So GitHub, you can configure GitHub in our org, either on-prem or cloud. So when you have GitHub configured on the Informatica Cloud, you can directly pull in, so check into the code to the GitHub repository, and then you can pull in from GitHub directly into the other org. So only problem here with GitHub is that you can only configure one particular branch in a particular org, because that configuration is on the admin. So when you configure GitHub, you need to specify a particular branch. And then if you are planning to use the same branch to pull in to the other environment, you may have some conflict, because if there are connections with different dev and QA are different databases, host names are different. So if you have to edit those kind of things, you may have to again edit it after pull in from GitHub. So in order to avoid that kind of manual intervention, you can actually build a pipeline from GitHub. So it's basically you clone, so you need to actually read from in a branch, and then before copy into another branch, you just need to do some extract and update using that asset management CLI. But yeah, there is no straightforward answer to that. But you can use asset management CLI to do those kind of editing on the exported file. I think same question again. Can we update manipulate assets after download step? Not with REST API. You can do it with the asset management CLI. So you can, in the process itself, you can actually use the command line. In the process, you can actually use command line. Service, and then using the command line service, you can actually call this asset management CLI, extract, and those kind of things, and then change it, package it back, do those kind of manipulations with asset management CLI, but not with REST API. Do we have record file? Do you have record file of this demonstration? It went fast. Yeah. So I'm going to put this process, entire process, and service connector and app connector, all of them with all the dependencies. I'll put this, I'll package it and publish it in the our knowledge article. So you should be able to download it from there.
Thank you, Prashant. I just wanted to add to that question. We have this recording available in the Success portal tomorrow. By tomorrow, it will be uploaded. And also, you will find the recording in the Informatica Support YouTube channel there. And in the Success portal, you will also be able to download the slide deck if you have missed anything. Yeah, please go ahead, Prashant. Thank you.
Yes. So publish is not a public. How would we publish? So it's actually there. The REST API resource is there for publishing. It's just that we don't have the version which we can publish it to all the public. So what we are doing is, if you have any, if you are planning to use REST API to publish after deploying the assets, we can actually give you that REST API URLs. but we don't want to, really put that into the knowledge article right now because we are planning to have some changes on that API resources. So once it is completely done, then we should be able to publish it to all the people, all the customers. So if you have any requirement to publish it, we can actually give you that REST API resources for that. So it's actually, we give it for on demand, not for everyone. Hope I answered that one. Then, so when publish is made public, it is going to automatically handle publishing. Yes. So in order to publish the objects, basically again, you need to have that object IDs which you want to publish, right? So you have to again add another action in the service connection to publish it. So you just create another action in the service connector with publish REST API resource, and then put that input as your object IDs which you want to publish, right? So that's how you're going to do it. But it is currently available, but we are not giving to everyone unless if you have any specific ask to that. So if you have any questions to that, you can send an email to me or Shiv, so we can actually send you that REST API resource for that. And then I saw you have the slide online. It will have. Okay. I think it's not a question, right? During the tag creation for new object, how do we ensure all dependent objects also get migrated? Yes. So by default, when you export any object from Informatica Cloud, unless you provide that include dependencies as false, it is going to take all the dependencies. So by default, it is going to consider that include dependencies as true. So unless you specify it as false, it won't. It will pick all the dependencies. Okay. Any other things? So apart from tag, I saw a question before about instead of tag, are there any other options? Yes, there are other options, like you can use the last update timestamp, you can use folder name is equal to this, or you can use different query parameters in the find object by assets, right? Find objects by that API resources. If you look at that API resource for find object, you will see there are different query parameters you can pass. Tag is one of them. Similarly, you can use folder name, last updated timestamp, or user. So there are different query parameters you can use. So I just, for this demonstration, I just use tag, but you can use, depends on how do you want to do it. But yeah, actually, I had to go a little faster because there are so many API calls in this one, and we don't have much time to demonstrate all of them. But yeah. Did you mean that connection remap is not possible via REST, but it is possible when using command line utilities? Yeah, so connection remap, right? So I think you're talking about, again, editing the object after exporting before deploying into another org, because you may have host name different, or database host name different, or username different. So in order to edit any of those things, we cannot edit it, right? Unless you edit that metadata which we export from Informatica Cloud, we cannot edit that in the REST API. So either you can manually edit them after deploying it. Even in Power Center world also, when we deploy, it will have the older dev version, right? We have to go and edit the password and the username, password, or hostname, things like that. Similarly, here also you have to go and edit, but the way to automate this process is using that CLI management tool, asset management tool. So that has this extract and package option. So extract, which is going to extract that zip file into our local file system with all the extracted files. Then you may have to parameterize some of the options, inputs where you want to replace. For example, database connection or username, password. You can put all these as parameters and then find and replace in that metadata file which you export. So that we can do it through some scripting, not with the REST API, right? But in the process itself, you can build it. So what you can do is, instead of after you export and download, you can actually call that command line script. You can create a script which uses the command line to extract and edit the file and then package it back. You can create that shell script or something, then call the shell script through the process itself, and then once that is successful, then you can use that to import. So that's the solution to that. So probably I should have done that to give a demonstration, but we don't have much time. But probably we can do that in the another session or something I can plan later. But yeah, so that's a good question. So yeah, to answer in short, we cannot edit it through REST API. The files, once we export, we have to use a asset management tool for that. Is there any limit on the number of components that can be moved? No, there are no limit. You can move everything, all the assets. There are no limitation. It's just that it might take more time while exporting and importing, but there are no limit as of now.
Thank you, Prashant. Let's wait for some more time for any questions. If you do not have any questions in 1 or 2 minutes, we'll end the session. Also, just wanted to call out to everyone that we have a survey right after the session. Please go through it and let us know your feedback about this session. And if you have any suggestion for future webinars, let us know. Through that, we will definitely love to hear from you.
Okay, I guess I don't see any other questions. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we have answered all the questions. If you have failed to answer any of the questions, we'll try to get back to you right after this session. Thanks everyone for joining. Thank you, Prashant and Shiv, for the wonderful session. Prashant especially for the great presentation. Thanks everyone for joining. We'll see you on our next Tech Tuesdays. Bye.
Thank you.